To explain carrying capacity, you created an analogy of the tragedy of the commons.
Yes.
Could you explain that for us?
The tragedy of the commons is concerned with the problem of allocation of resources. For religious reasons, many people want to adopt a motto like the one that Karl Marx expressed, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs. In other words, the mere fact that you exist entitles you to your share of whatever there is that's around. Now, no other species of animal operates by this principle, and to think that human beings can do so safely is a very radical idea, and biologists don't think that they can. And as a matter of fact, the experiments that have been tried among human beings have shown that it doesn't work. For example, when you have a common pasture land and anybody who wants to can pasture his cattle on it, this works as long as there aren't many people. But as soon as there are many people, meaning many animals to be pastured, it turns out that people will put too many animals on the pasture, and if they're completely free to do what they want to, and finally you have to do either one of two things. Either you divide the pasture up into many different pieces of private property, and each person is responsible for his own, or you say, we'll manage this as a group, we'll appoint a manager, we'll pay him to manage this, and he will tell us how many cattle we can put on the land, and we have to do as he says. So it's either socialism or private property. Either one of those may work, but the unmanaged commons cannot possibly work once the population gets above a certain size.
If nations can't take care of their people, what do we do?
I don't think this is right to say nations can't take care of all their people. I think that we have to say that the people who are in charge of the nations maintain they cannot take care of all their people, and we should just tell them, we'll go back and make some more plans, try again. Because if we don't adopt that attitude, then we'll end up encouraging nations to become parasitic, and that's a bad road to go down.
Do you have a situation where there are just some nations or some people that might not be able to be brought up to the same standard of living as the United States?
The question of whether other nations can be brought up to our standard of living, I think, is the wrong one to ask, because it looks as though our standard of living is so high that if all the people of the world tried to live at that level right now, it just couldn't be done. Two things I think are going to have to happen. I think Americans will, whether they like it or not, have to lower their standard of living some, and the other is some of the other nations can raise it some, but I don't think they'll be able to raise it to what is, at the present time, the average American standard of living.
Is today's standard of living in the United States based on keeping third world countries in a lower standard of living?
I think not. I think that's a mistake to think that we do it at their expense. Don't think that's it at all. But the point is that we cannot say, we could try sharing, we could send some of our energy or some of our material things to them, but this wouldn't result in their being any better for long, because they are increasing at such a rate they would absorb anything that we send them. I think this is the wrong way to look at it. It's better to say that each nation, it's up to them to manage their own affairs. We have to manage ours, but we're not taking things from other countries. We buy whatever we get. The bananas we get from Central America, we don't take them, we buy them. We give them money, they use the money to buy other things, and that's their business. And as long as we live on this sort of a trade business, it's fair. Now we'll go on from there.
The population is growing so rapidly. For millions of years it was growing slowly, but yet in another 10, 20 years we'll see another billion people. In a few decades we'll see a doubling of the population.
Well, there'll be a lot of suffering, and there may even be a reversal. This is the thing one doesn't predict, partly because if you predict a reversal, people say, oh, you want one. You're cruel. You want to see people die. I don't want to see anybody die, but nevertheless, the fact is that by any reasonable standards, at least 1 million and maybe more than that die every year from malnutrition over the world, and the number may rise. Doesn't mean I want it, just that we're in a being very badly managing our resources.
You don't want anybody to die, but sometimes your solutions sound like that because you've taken the position, as the medical doctor does in wartime, of triage.
Yes, now, and this is because one has to insist that each nation be responsible for its own numbers. If you do not, then you're in for real trouble. We cannot solve other people's problems by taking in their extra numbers. And so this is why one has to say, if you're suffering because of the extra numbers, do something about it, but don't expect to get rid of the extra.
In other words, immigration from one nation to another isn't going to be the answer.
It's never a solution. Not to overpopulation. Maybe a solution of other sorts if you can get rid of the ones you don't want.